Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Blizzard Watch podcast. This is a podcast about Blizzard Entertainment and its many games. I don't know why I'm talking like this. I am Matt. I am the host of this show. With me is Joe, who is also the host of the show. We both host this show. We both host another show. There's much hosting going on. Anyway, come on in. Let's talk about stuff.
Does that make us the new two-headed ogre at this point, though?
Yeah, everybody it's merged into a two-headed ogre with me eventually.
Yeah, okay. I'm good with that.
Unfortunate for all of you. But anyway, yeah. Now that I've got that image in my head.
It was my turn to derail Matt. He does this to me every week on Lore Watch. It was my turn.
Yeah, I am he who has sidetracks. Anyway, though, we're going to talk about patch 9.1 because it's been out for about a week. And today is the opening of the Sanctum of Domination raid. And quite frankly, as we're recording this, Sylvanas still isn't dead.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that, actually.
Yeah, I thought she'd be dead by now. I straight up thought that somebody would have zerged her down, and so we'd have the cinematic. But if it's happened, no one has talked about it. But by the time you hear this, if you're listening to it recorded, she might already be dead. And
although I think it's funny, though, because part of that, though, just for you folks at home, you should listen to this past week's Lore Watch, because it was all about Naxxramas, and it's pretty important for what you're about to go experience if you're doing any sort of raiding. Just throwing it out there.
But regardless, as of this recording, hasn't happened yet. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. I think it's interesting that we can talk about it without spoiling it because it hasn't happened yet.
Although,
we don't know.
According to chat, they are currently on Sylvanas right now. Somebody's already pulling her.
So yeah, she might be dead by the time we finish the discussion. But the great thing about
literally the cinematic just went up as we're recording this. Not watching it yet.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to talk about it without having seen the cinematic. Basically, one of several things might have happened. We don't know which as of we're recording this. Obviously, we just found out that it's now out. So yeah. But it's really an interesting thing to get to. We're kind of at the, love it or hate it, we're at the tail end of several years of World of Warcraft storytelling. Something that they had not done ever. They've never done anything like this, where a major story thread carried on this long. Because Sylvanas' arc really started in Cataclysm.
Yeah, like, as far as her taking center stage and becoming something that was incredibly pivotal to the story being told, yeah, like, that really was when she took, like, that particular moment. Which is interesting considering what it followed, which was probably her lowest point.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was interesting because Sylvanas' story was rooted in, the antagonism against the Lich King and the Scourge. And the Forsaken, too, for that matter. And we went up to Wrath of the Lich King, and you got to go, if you were playing Horde in particular, you got to go through the Halls of Reflection and eventually fight your way to the Lich King himself alongside Sylvanas, who then finds out, I can't kill him. Like, I can't even fight him. And had to run away. This is not the kind of thing Sylvanas likes to do. And it really, from his death changed her, and that's where we get the Edge of Night story moving into Cataclysm. And then, so from that moment until now is a continuum. From the Edge of Night story, through her role in Cataclysm, where Garrosh uses her to try and destroy Gilneas, and she kills Liam Greymane in front of his father, and triggers that whole thing. Her story has been developing ever since. From that moment, I mean, she doesn't do much in Warlords, obviously, but she comes back with a Vengeance in Legion, and you get to see her as the war chief. You get to see what she's doing up in the Storm Peaks. You get to see the confrontation with Gen Greymane. That solidifies whatever her plans are. You get to see everything she does in Battle for Azeroth, the step-by-step, planning she's engaging in, her end game to basically kill everybody in the world. And finally, here we are in Shadowlands at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is finally, even if the character survives this raid and continues on, it's the end of that storyline. We'll be moving into something else.
Well, yeah, we're moving into sort of like a recovery period after that almost, right? And it's been a long run, like you're pointing out. It's been it's been an emotional roller coaster, whether you love the character or hate the character from that first moment to now. And everybody out there, like, I'm just going to say this, regardless of what your stance is, you are absolutely right to feel whatever way you feel about it. And those of you that have seen the cinematic at this point, I understand that there's going to be a lot of emotion boiling around it, whether you loved it, hated, or got nothing what you wanted. But the weight of that moment, like, we still have more to go too. Like, this is just the second raid of this expansion.
This is the 0.1 patch, guys.
Yeah.
Even if this one's as short as Warlords, there's a 0.2 patch coming. There will be at least one more raid. I expect there to be 2 more.
I also expect there to be 2 more, and probably some ancillary content after that.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if 0.2 is the sidetrack raid.
Probably. They're already setting it up with the broker stuff.
Yeah, I just, generally speaking, if you go look at other expansions, unless they are short like Warlords, there tends to be the raid that is not, it's kind of sidereal to like what's been going on. BFA sort of had that. It didn't really have it, but it kind of did, in that it had the I want to say Bastion of Storms, but I can't remember the name of it. The side raid over in the bloody heck, now I can't remember the name of that zone.
Oh, I know you're talking about the one with the 2 bosses.
Yeah.
They
had the Zara lore, and then they had that. And then we came to the Ashara raid, and then after the Ashara raid, we went into Nyalotha. So there was a side raid, it just wasn't its own patch. I feel like there will be something sidereal content of some sort. But then again, if you go look at Cataclysm, all the raids were related to the main story, but they were also somewhat departures. Like Firelands wasn't Deathwing. It was Ragnaros. But it was related to the whole overall story of Cataclysm in that the reason Ragnaros was attacking was Deathwing. I feel like we'll get something along those lines, but I don't, this is all the future projection. I just know that we're at a place right now that feels like the end of Act 1 of a 3-act play.
Yeah, and that's really the best way to put it. Like, it's got that sort of momentum, right? And it's got that point where a lot of times back in almost like, I want to say 50s, 60s, 70s, when like traveling musicals were like really like in theater were being a thing, they had what they called like the false climax, right? It was this point of the play or the opera or whatever was being done at that time that you would experience that, like, oh, you think you're getting your resolution, but it wasn't the climax. It wasn't the resolution. If anything, it was, like you said, it's just the end of the first act, and there were still 2 more acts to follow. This definitely feels like that. It has that sort of false finish feel to it, which isn't a bad thing. And it sounds bad, but it's not meant to be. It just means that there's more story to tell, and that we might not be getting exactly what we expected to, and that's not always a bad thing.
Yeah, I would agree. But at any rate, without having seen it to talk about it, and not wanting to talk about it anyway because we don't want to spoil anything, I will say that so far I've got positive feelings about patch 9.1.
I do too.
I think that Korthia is a step in the right direction in terms of content. Will it get old if we're in there for 9 months?
Sure.
Yes, absolutely it will. But for right now, it's pretty well done. I've only barely scratched it. I've just picked around it because I'm actually trying to decide which of my characters to move into for the next phase of the game. I kind of want to switch to my Kyrian for a little bit and play them. So I'm looking around and figuring out how I can get that done. But I have gone in enough to say that, yeah, I think that the Torghast changes were positive. I mean, at the same time, I am struggling in Torghast, like getting to rank, getting up to like the next levels, to getting up to 9, 10, 11, and 12. Not going to be easy for me. But I don't know that I need it to be easy. I can progress at a slower pace, and that's fine because I don't worry that, oh God, I've died 4 times. This thing's basically over now. I can't afford to die at all because if I do, then I won't get anywhere. That's gone, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, I'm definitely on that boat as well.
Anything standing out for you?
Honestly, like I don't mean to like go back to Korthia, but like I'm not gonna lie, the Maw wasn't what I expected it to be. And I didn't really care for it prior to this patch. But now that 9.1's hit, I'm kind of digging Korthia. I'm calling it Maw 2.0, but Maw 2.0 is way better than Maw 1.0 for me. I actually just like what's in the game. I like the idea that we're, digging through stuff, uncovering story and lore, and maybe that's really what the draw was for me. Because one of the greatest things about Shadowlands is I know absolutely nothing about the Shadowlands. We talk about it a lot, but every time you think you know what's going on there, they throw a curveball. And ultimately, we talked about this multiple times, it's a new place that has never existed prior, really, truly, to this content really being available to us. So everything we're learning is new. Everything is fresh. Everything has that sort of nascent potential. It feels a lot to me like running through vanilla WoW back in the day and starting to like try to piece things together that maybe are new or are extrapolations of existing lore. And I kind of like that, and it kind of makes me feel a little bit more invigorated. So I'm just here for 9.1. It's not perfect. There are things that, I'm not going to like, and that's fine. But for the most part, pretty happy with what's come out and what they've changed. And the Torghast stuff, like you said, I like the idea that I could kind of go in there and just putz around now and not have to worry about, well, I died 5 times. Guess I'm just done and wasted an hour. So
yeah, absolutely. That was one of the things I really didn't like about Torghast. I still feel like Torghast should give you actual loot, and I think I'm always going to feel that way. I don't think there's anything they can do to make me not feel that way. They can add a borrowed power system to Torghast where you'll get stronger as you do more stuff. But at the end of the day, if there's no loot in it, I'm just going to feel like, okay, this is always something I have to basically remind myself, I'm doing this to do something else, but I'm not going to be able to pursue like other goals while I'm doing it. And that means that I'm going to have to always weigh it against an activity that can get me gear. And that's always going to be there in Torghast. So that's always going to be a problem for me. But it's not a deal breaker. It doesn't kill Torghast for me. It is something to keep in mind. And there's lots of stuff that I just simply have not gotten to experience. Like, I'm not doing Mythics at the moment because I don't have a group that does Mythics, and I'm not on at times when there's a lot of people around. I tend to play late at night, like 3 o'clock in the morning. It just tends to be my game time. So, haven't seen those yet. Don't really have an opinion. I don't know if I'll get into Sanctum of Domination tonight. My guild is raiding, but I'm kind of semi-retired from raiding with them at the moment. Not because there's anything bad. They'd take me if I showed up, but it's just showing up for every raid night at the scheduled time is not really something I can predictably do right now. For various reasons. I mean,
I'm looking forward to getting into the raid tomorrow with my guild, honestly.
Yeah,
also because
like
I get to watch Liz flail, which is always fun. I know you're in the chat, Liz. Love ya.
Yeah, well, when you're the one killing her half the time. But anyway, there's a lot to 9.1. I feel like we could talk about it for a while, but at the same time, I feel like we should probably move on to do some emails and talk about other stuff. But
I think so too.
Okay, if you've got an email or question for the show, there's multiple ways you can get it to us. One is the email address, podcast@blizzardwatch.com, with the subject line podcast of Blizzard Watch, so we know it's for this show. We got a couple Lore Watch questions in there, by the way, Joe, so you should look.
I saw.
But yeah, if you can do it that way, or you can go to our patron Q and podcast questions channel if you're a patron, and we look there first for questions for this podcast and the other podcast. Or you can go to our Q questions channel, also on our Discord, and you can ask questions there too, and that we go there as well. So yeah, there's multiple ways to get stuff to us. You can also tweet stuff. If you want to tweet at me or Joe, you have to tell us it's for our podcast.
Yeah, because
Like,
we respond a lot of times, like, or at least I do. I don't know about Matt, but like I respond to people. So
yeah, I respond if I feel like it. I'll just be upfront. I get some comments and some stuff that I don't want to talk about, so I just don't. But if I'm like, oh, okay, I can talk about this.
and also don't feel bad if we don't pick one of your questions if you do give it to us. It's not that we don't like want to talk about them. It's just sometimes they don't fit in that particular show or instance. A lot of times we try to shape things to have a certain cadence or flow.
Or for that matter, just sometimes I'm like, okay, I can't actually give this a good answer yet.
Yeah, and it needs time.
I don't want to short shrift it. Like that's a big thing for me. Is I really don't like when someone asks me a question that's important to them, and I kind of have to blow it off because I have no idea. That's not cool. I want to be able to go do some research and see if I can figure it out. But yeah, anyway, Joe's going to read some emails for us now, if you don't mind, Joe.
I do not mind at all. Our first question comes from our good friend Riptides. We've talked about how us, as adventurers, often are the ones causing problems or playing into the villain's hands. What if we had an expansion where our character was the big bad? To a lot of people in Azeroth, bad things didn't start happening until we got involved. What if they rose against us and we either spent the expat leaning into that role or trying to win hearts and minds to convince them why we had to do the things we did? Do you want to go first on that one? I mean, if not, I will.
Because I want to finish this piece of chocolate that I'm trying to eat really fast. So you go.
Honestly, it's an interesting concept, but I don't know how well something like that would really legitimately play out in-game mechanically. And that's always sort of the problem, right? Like, a high concept is you can have a former quote-unquote champion or Maw Walker or whatever title we are sort of filling the role for in whatever expansion previous or whatever, become a bad guy. You can do that, but then it becomes canonically like this shaman became a bad guy or this warrior became a bad guy or whatever. It's generally not going to be you as the player sort of filling that role, right? And now, story-wise, you could have something where we are trying to make amends with the individuals, and that I could see working where, you know, maybe we're explaining to the Stormwind why we, you know, had a battle in their fields, or, you know, why we had to take the fight here and there, and why half of Stormwind burned at the beginning of Battle for Azeroth, and all this other stuff, right? Like, that could work, and that could be something where we're earning favor and trust again with the people of our respective factions. I could see that. I just don't know how you would reconcile like us becoming the big bad or the villain. But I could see us paying a price for some of the very short-sighted heroics we pull, because as Matt and I pointed out multiple times, and especially on this past week's Lore Watch, we do that a lot, and we've been doing it for a lot of years, and a lot of the bad stuff that does happen, like you pointed out, is kind of our fault. So yeah. What about you, Matt? What do you think?
Depends on like what do you want this to be. Do you want to focus more on the idea of trying to repair a damaged reputation with the people of Azeroth, or do you want to, focus more on the concept of all hands are against you, and you're doing what you're doing? Like, what kind of big bad do you want the player to be? What is the experience you're going for? I can think of like several different ways to approach this. One would be to do a like through a broken mirror thing where we come back from the Shadowlands. It doesn't have to be the next expansion, but I'm just using this as an example for rhetorical purposes. We come back from the Shadowlands and Azeroth is all sorts of messed up. Like, instead of Anduin on the throne in Stormwind, there's a cackling like Lord Blackmore. The Horde is ruled by, Rend and Main Blackhand. Everything is messed up. And you have to try and figure out how to get your world to work or make sense. That's one thing you could do. And you're still the heroes from your perspective. But from the perspective of the people of this world that you're suddenly thrust into, they're the proper authorities, and you're the menaces trying to overthrow their rule. The old concept of, everyone's the hero of their own story. Adelis Blackmore doesn't want you to stop him. The Rend and Main Blackhand absolutely don't want to not be the war chiefs of the Horde. So that's one approach you could take to it, and that way you get to have, your characters as a villain. The others is you're actually sent to infiltrate a villainous organization. Like, imagine if your character has to spend the entire expansion joining this new threat and working your way up, and it means you have to go and do things like for that group, and you can't break character, you can't break your role. I have to actually burn this Stormwind Armory. I have to actually lay siege to the Valley of Heroes in Orgrimmar. I have to do these things. And so the people of Azeroth see you as a villain, and you're starting to think, maybe I am a villain. Because everything I'm doing is so horrible. Yes, it's supposedly for the greater good, but I'm not really feeling it. That's another way you could do it. There's lots of ways that you could do it without having it be like simple as, okay, now I'm going to destroy it. Because quite frankly, that's happened a few times in game lore.
Mm-hmm.
Where previously heroic people like, okay, now I'm going to destroy everything. Is it my turn to go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs? Is that what we're doing? Okay. But for that matter, that might be fun too. Like, it straight up might be a fun... One of my favorite MMOs was City of Villains.
Oh god, City of Villains was amazing.
And that's because, unlike WoW, where both factions are constantly trying to be the good guys, and it's all shades of gray, and it's all a matter of perspective, City of Villains, you were straight up the bad guy.
Yep.
And that was fun. You lived in a world where there was a stasis between good and evil, where heroes would always ultimately triumph, but you'd come back and you'd get another shot. And I feel like you could do a fun expansion where your characters have decided enough's enough, and you just declare war against the Alliance and the Horde, and you go for broke. Maybe you start collecting all the, like, what was that idea? The Mongrel Horde? The
Mongrel Horde, yeah.
You start collecting all the various people on Azeroth who've been, like, stepped on by the Alliance and its allies, or the Horde and its allies, and you forge them into a weapon, and that could be fun. It doesn't really work for World of Warcraft. Like, it is hard to imagine how that story resolves itself and you go back to working for whatever faction you were in before. But I could see it being a cool expansion idea. Maybe, like, at the end of it, nobody knows you did it or something. I don't know. Or it turns out that, as you're going through, you discover, like, the true secret of what's going on, and you fight the actual bad guy at the end. But I don't know. But there are ways to do it, and you could do fun things with it. I don't think you want it to be as simple as you are now the guy who burns the boats and lies to his allies, and, hey, that rune blade's looking mighty tantalizing. I should pick that up. Because A, that's been done, and B, we've had that story. We had that story with Arthas. We had that story with Kael'thas. We've kind of had that story with Sylvanas now. I don't know if I want to play an expansion where I just do the same dumb things they do. You know what I mean? Like, but I do feel like there are ways you could get this kind of sensation of the world is against you. You could get that. And you could do it in various ways where it would necessarily mean that you, at the end of that expansion, you're just like, well, that was a big whoopsie doodle, huh? Let's all just pretend that didn't happen. You could do it in ways like I said, the one that comes to mind is either the infiltrating and having to basically Sons of Anarchy your way through it, or the one where you just, what happened to the world and how do I get back to the one I remember? Like, am I in an alternate timeline, or did this timeline get changed? Like, is this a Warlords of Draenor, or is this a Caverns of Time? Like, what do I even do? Like, why are things the way they are? And it could be really fun if you were in a world that seemed better. Like, imagine if you ended up on an Azeroth where, like, Arthas was king of Lordaeron, Varian's king of a Stormwind that never burned, everybody seems happy, but there's the Tauren are practically almost wiped out. The orcs never came to help them. And the Legion's going to show up, and there's none of half of the forces that fought them are gone. The Night Elves are still over in their thing. Nobody's been to Pandaria. The world it looks nicer, but it's more fragile. And then you have to decide, okay, is it worth being the one to destroy this fragile piece on these people that they think they think their lives are idyllic and they don't know what's coming? Do I have the right to take that from them? They're not going to thank me for it, but it might be the only way this version of Azeroth survives. And so like there's various ways you could do it. I do think it would be fun and interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, and they've already laid the groundwork for some of that stuff too. And we could talk about that. I mean, we have talked about it in the past, but like there's been different threads that they could pull on that would make a lot of that stuff feasible or make sense, or kind of like have enough weight or enough legs to sort of carry a story like that. Whether like look what's going on with the Night Elves and their relation to the rest of like the Alliance. The Horde is trying something that it's never done before with this whole council situation. There's plenty of opportunity for there to be dissension or breaking off, or people that are not down with what those choices are. And so, I mean, you could do something that explores maybe a fracturing of the world, or like you said, maybe it's something completely different. Maybe it's an alternate universe. There's options, but we'll see what happens.
I also, I really do like the idea of possibly doing a story where you're infiltrating something. And then you have to decide, okay, how far am I willing to go to keep up the act? What am I willing to do? What if it turns out there's a group in the Night Elves that it wants to overthrow Tauren, and or even they like the Tauren who's obsessed with vengeance and they want to push her more in that direction. And you're sent to infiltrate, but after a while you're like, I'm starting to. And you could do it much of the way they had the Sylvanas loyalists and the people who were like, no, this is crazy. You could totally have people who are like, these people make sense. I agree with them. And you could choose to go along that path. There's ways to do it, and I think it could be cool. I don't know how that would be approached. This is the one thing. There's ways that you really have to think about how to approach it.
Yeah, and like we can sit here and talk about story all day long, but at the end of the day, too, it also boils down to what can they implement systems to make it in such a manner that it functions and works. We've seen other games in the past that have tried to do similar breakaways that weren't set up to do so and failed miserably because of it, because it just couldn't do what they wanted it to do. But I don't know. We'll see what happens with that one. I think we can move on to the next one from our friend 6K, though, if you're ready.
Yep.
Okay, well, 6K, I think you got this one in early and you called it because it was from today, but man, wasn't that thing that happened in the Raid cinematic something? I thought they were going to do something else, but they did that! How do you think that's going to affect things that could be affected by something like that? Spoiler question about the cinematic. Why is Tauren attacking Sylvanas? I don't understand why she would still be angry. I mean, we killed those two Valkyr.
This is my bad. There are like 3 questions.
Alright, well, go ahead.
Well, let's do the first one, and then you can read the second and third ones. I honestly, obviously, we don't know what happened, but I mean, it is going to affect things that are affected by that. We knew going into this that it's going to be like a big deal. Yeah, I feel like everybody knew that.
Everybody knew the weight of what was coming. Yeah.
And I think to go into your second thing, I mean, one of the reasons that the Toronto cinematic went the way it did was because it couldn't resolve everything, because Sylvanas was going to be in the raid. So Joe has a theory about that one.
Do you want me to go into it?
Yes, but only because we're doing all those raid lore watches, so there's not really a good time that we should talk about it.
Yeah, so
talk about your theory.
So I went on a tweet rampage. I wouldn't even say rampage, but I shared my theory yesterday because I knew that the new cinematic was coming out today. Over the last several weeks, we've been getting a lot of questions, whether it's in chat, direct messages, about why Elune spared Sylvanas. And I've been sitting on this for that entire time, for over a week. The thing is, I think everybody's been asking the wrong question, and I don't think it has anything to do with Elune sparing Sylvanas. At the end of the day, like, Elune, sure, gave power to Tauren to go take care of business, but we haven't figured out how to save Tauren yet. Everything that you do when you talk about the Night Warrior, when you talk about everything that happened with giving the power to, like, Theranax and Theranax's husband, it's been pretty much laid out in game. Once their task was done, once the goal was accomplished that they had asked for the power to do, the death of that old god, that was it. They were spent. That was the end of their time. And as a result, with that power receding, with it no longer being there, with that bargain being fulfilled, because that's what it is. It's a bargain being fulfilled. They died. If Tauren had killed Sylvanas in that moment, Tauren would die. You see it in the cinematic when the power is pulled back, when Elune pulls that power back. Tauren is left laying in the fetal position in that field with Ysera like mothering over her. And it's not that Elune forsook her in that moment. It's Elune didn't want her to die. Elune took enough of her power away so that she would have to stop, knowing that Ysera was on her way, knowing that Sylvanas wasn't going to kill Tauren at that moment because there was enough in play, enough in motion to keep that from happening, and it was to buy us time. It wasn't to save or spare Sylvanas, it was to buy us time to figure out how to save Tauren. Because here's the thing, if Tauren dies, everything for the Night Elves goes sideways right now. It's already going sideways with everything that happened with Teldrassil, with Darnassus burning, with everything happening there. What do you think happens with the next 3 likely people to lead the Night Elves if Tauren dies? And Malfurion, he's useless. I'm going to be honest with you. Whether you love or hate him, he is not a good leader. He is a druid. He is not a Night Elf leader. Her daughters, Chandris and Maeve, at this point, what would happen to them? Maeve is just now starting to get into a stable mental position after years of being crazed and sort of like single-minded into her fury. She's starting to actually understand like what it is to have balance and be a leader. And now you have Chandris, who is all throughout this expansion and last expansion, she has felt her mother's rage. She has felt the rage of her people, and she's trying her best to hold it together. Look how she was in the Ardenweld stuff, where like Tauren is just falling up, like is seemingly lost to her at first. When we see her in Torghast, when you're doing that sort of questline experience, she's in pieces. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know what she would do if anything happened to Tauren. In this moment, if Tyrande dies, the Night Elves fracture. They fracture more than they ever have before. Elune didn't abandon Tauren. She saved Tauren to buy us time to fix the problem that nobody else has been able to fix so far. That's my theory. And I think that's why I think, and I understand people feel a certain way about that. And again, there's some new light with the cinematic that just released today. But I think that's the part that people forget, is that when everything is said and done, when Tauren's bargain is completed, which he said, give me the power to seek vengeance for my people, she's done. She's gone. She's off the board unless we figure out how to stop it. And that was the entirety opening of Act 1 in Shadowlands. So, yeah, that's my theory. That's what I've been talking about. And like I said, I just think people have been asking the wrong question. I think it's not, how does Elune get vengeance? It's, how does Elune give us time to save Tauren? And that's what she did. So, that's what I got.
Okay. I wanted you to get to talk about it. However, quickly have to log back into the game because it did that thing where it disconnected me. So,
well, I'll let you get back in, but yeah, so that's what I tweeted about, and that's what I've been going on about, and I'm curious to see if that has anything to do with what's happening now, because again, Elune is still an order of magnitude higher than I think we can possibly fathom. Like, I've had a couple people ask me if she's like Zoval's wife, or if she's another Titan, or if she was the first Titan soul, or whatever the case is. No idea. Don't really know. But I can tell you that she is an order of magnitude different than anything we've possibly experienced. We barely understand Titans at this point. I don't think we understand Elune. I don't think we have any real good idea.
That's fair, I believe.
Yeah.
But anyway, go on to the next one then?
Let's see here.
He's got 2 more questions. He's got more about Tyrande right there.
Yeah, so it says, why is Tyrande attacking Sylvanas? I mean, well, yeah. That's why. I don't understand why she would still be angry. I mean, we killed those 2 Valkyrie on Darkshore. I thought that would be payment enough for Teldrassil. What could she possibly be still be upset about? I mean, we kind of know what she's still upset about. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, in fact, the two Valkyr were not enough.
And technically, they're not dead.
Well, they're dead, but I mean, they're in the Shadowlands now, so that's what happens when things die. So,
yeah.
Although I think it's interesting that we still don't actually know what Nathanos' fate was.
No.
We know that he died, but he certainly didn't show up at Sylvanas' side. So, yeah, there's that. In terms of, I don't think that vengeance. There's always been that thing, and very much so in Warcraft, the idea that seeking vengeance ultimately is more about you than the person you want vengeance on. Like, it affects you and changes you. If you look at Maiev, her whole thing about trying to get revenge over 10,000 years warped her almost completely.
Yeah,
she's only barely recovered from it now. Only after the Legion invasion did she regain any kind of equilibrium. And they still haven't done much with that story, quite frankly. I think there should have been some, if nothing else, a short story about how Maiev and basically came to some kind of understanding with the rest of the Night Elves about that whole whoopsie, I tried to murder people thing. But yeah, I don't think I think it's pretty self-explanatory what Tyrande is mad about. She's still mad about Teldrassil. No, she didn't think killing those two Valkyr was anything like payment. It was simply the best she could do at the moment. It wasn't like Tyrande was even... I mean, Sylvanas wasn't even there. Nathanos was there. Sylvanas wasn't there. So if she'd killed Nathanos then, instead of when she did kill him, it wouldn't really have made much of a difference. So yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say on that one.
Yeah, I don't think there's really much else to say about it, but I mean, thank you, Six. You send in some delightfully absurd things.
Wasn't there one more thing?
No, that was it.
Okay.
Yep. So we can move on to our next one, which is from Moxla Blastrig. Hello, watchers of lore. Well, we're using it for this one, folks. All this talk of raids and their backstory has me thinking, what would a great raid with Tauren themes and story elements look like? That's a really good question. Like, what would signify a good Tauren raid? Because we kind of already have, like, kinda with, if you want to talk like Moradon with the centaurs and stuff like that and everything surrounding that.
Here's what I've been thinking. If you want to hear my crazy wish list
please.
idea.
I do.
We know that before the Yongal, there was a people that were like the ancestors of all the the Tauren type races, and those people were captured by the Mogu and subject to experimentation to make them larger and angrier and more fierce. I'm assuming that means there's some kind of race of Shetland, like you know how they have like the Highland cattle that are like small and cute and real fuzzy.
Yeah.
There's some race of effectively Tauren gnomes. There's this smaller race of ancestral yak people who are all furry and cute, living in some place that's probably an island that used to be somewhat connected to Pandaria, but is now off on its own. And there's this Titan vault that the Mogu used to change and shape them in there, and they're in there. And you have to find it and reclaim it because it's related to the myth. Do you remember the myth the Tauren have about how the Tauren people at one point, like sudden blackness out of the world came forth and corrupted them, and they waged war against each other? I think that myth is about the Yongal, and about the Yongal became, because the Mogu did what they did to them, they became fearsome and militaristic, and the Earth Mother reached out to them and soothed them, and the ones that it saved moved on and migrated away. But that vault is the place where it happened to them, where they were turned into the Yongal in the first place. And one of the things I've wanted to do, like I wanted to see since the beginning, is what is the Earth Mother? Is the Earth Mother Azeroth? Is it the Titan inside the world? Has that Titan been speaking to the Tauren this whole time? Like, Magni is currently the speaker, but what if meanwhile she's been talking to the Tauren this whole time, and the Tauren have interpreted her words as myths and legends. And so the story of Aparo and Musha is just one of many stories that the Titan has been telling them about its creation and its existence. And I would love to see something like that where you go into this ancient vault and you discover the original primordial the ancestors to all the various Tauren races, and you get a sense of like how they went on their diaspora and why they went on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because we don't really know. We don't know why like the Tauren and the Tonka left.
Yeah, we don't know why they became nomads.
Yeah, but both groups were like, you know what, we don't want to stay here. If you want to stay here and fight, the Pandaren for like what the Mogu left behind, go ahead. But we don't want to do that. It's really interesting that the Tonka, I mean the Yongal as they exist, were basically created as a bulwark against the Mantid. They literally, the Mogu were like, we don't want to fight them all the time, so we're going to put you up here in the steppes, and you're gonna blunt their assault. You're going to be the first ones to have to fight them. And the Yongal developed their incredibly aggressive fire culture. And it's interesting to think of each of the Tauren races in their approach to shamanism as another aspect of this, where the Yongal one is completely about dominating the one element they see as valuable. They only see fire as valuable. They don't care about earth or water or air. They don't care about the spirits. They care about burning their enemies. The Tonka will take any help they can get, but they're just as aggressive towards the spirits as the Yongal are. Only the Shuhalo have this idea of living in peace and harmony with them. How did that happen? How did that split happen? Is it because of something that happened to them on their migration, or did it happen at the place where they were created? Could do a lot of cool things with that. I'd love to see something that dealt with that idea.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like what my wish list would be really for that as well, is kind of understanding more about their culture prior to like what we actually know. And it's we know a lot more about a lot of the previous, or a lot of the other races, a lot of the other creations of the Titans that live on the planet. Like, but what would be cool to learn about is like you said, the origin of the Tauren, and imagine how they would react to that too. Like, how many generations has it been since they were wandering? How many generations has it been since they've lost any of that stuff? And I believe I think they still are, because it's been a while since I've done like Tauren specific stuff, but like it's a very oral tradition sort of like setup for like keeping track of their history. They tell stories and they keep it alive that way, right?
There's a few scrolls. Like if you go to Thunder Bluff, you can find a few scrolls that are like inscribed with the stories, but the stories were preserved orally. Like the story of how the Tauren have a story about how Cenarius came to be. That is basically, his father, Malorn, was basically trying to escape Tauren hunters, and they chased him practically into the sky, and it was the moon that saved him. Their nets were going to drag him down, but a loon saved him and fell in love with him, and the two of them had Cenarius. That's how Cenarius came to be. What does that actually mean? Like, who the heck knows? It's a crazy myth. Is it just to center the Tauren's role in the natural world as hunters? Is it to actually give you some information about the origins of Cenarius and the Emerald Dream? Couldn't tell you, but it's interesting. It's one of many such myths that they have that don't necessarily fit with other myths that other people have.
But I'd like to see them sort of like maybe stumble upon like a repository of information. We know that like things exist, like discs that have like recorded data, right? Hard data. Mm-hmm. We've had whole expansions.
The Distant Ganon and so forth. Yeah, absolutely.
What if there's something like that exists for them? What if there's a record of their actual heritage and a lot of these things? How would they react? And you think about how far they are now from maybe removed from like a centralized society, where they had like before Thunderbluff, there wasn't, to them in their recent memory, there wasn't another city. But what if there was? What if they got to discover the pieces of their past that were lost? Because that's the other problem with oral tradition, right? Like you lose pieces. That's
one of the things that have always interested me in terms of like the idea of all the various groups of, I'm going to call them Taurenoids, like the Tonka, the Yongal, the Tauren. What if there was an attempt to actually bring them all together? What if there was an attempt to have like a core, a council of these various groups?
You mean like the trolls did?
Kind of, but like for instance, the Tonka are already in the Horde supposedly. At least one tribe is.
Yeah.
The High Mountain Tauren and the Shuhalo Tauren are both in the Horde. Imagine if the Horde reached out to the Ungol and said, "Look, you can keep going it the way you're going it, and look at how well it has not worked for you. You're stranded in a terrible place between the Mantid and the Pandaren. You're never going to get good settling areas. You're basically stuck there. We can offer you a way out. We can offer you a way off of that island, and you can be part of something else. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but you could still do a cool thing with like the meeting. Like with the Alliance, it's like the last thing we need is the Horde to get more, even angrier Fire Tauren. You know, it's bad enough that they have the Tauren they have. We really don't want to see yet another group of giant Tauren, this time that like to set themselves on fire when they attack you. Maybe we could try and scuttle this somehow, or at least know what they're doing. And meanwhile, on the Horde side, it's like, you know, trying to keep everything calm. Like, because the Tonka are aggressive, the Yongle are aggressive, the High Mountain are kind of aggressive. You know, and the Shuhalo, they do a good job of acting like they're not aggressive.
But when they get riled and when they get set in motion, woo!
Yeah, I mean, Cairn was going to kill Garrosh. He was going to kill him.
Handily.
Yeah, he was going to, and keep in mind that Cairn was old. Like, not just old, but old. And he was going to crush Garrosh. Like, Garrosh knew it. He knew, I can't, you know, I might actually have to try and kill him. There's no way I can beat him. And that's the thing. The Tauren are, like, there's one point where Sylvanas in War Crimes actually realizes, oh, he can crush me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Bane can actually crush me right now, and all my plans will be for nothing if I push this.
Which is why she hated him, right? Like, it was, not only was he incredibly powerful, probably had more martial prowess than he ever showed anybody, but, you know, he was beloved. That's a huge threat.
So
right?
You can obviously see, like, you can have a lot of interesting potential about, even the other members of the Horde are kind of nervous about this. And they also want to keep it relatively peaceful. The last thing they need is a bunch of angry Tauren brawling with a bunch of angry Yongle in the streets of Orgrimmar.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot of things you could do with the Tauren. I really do feel like, and people often accuse me of being against the Horde, and I'm not. It's a video game, and I'm aware of that. But I do think that the Horde really, really, really over-focuses on certain groups.
I would agree.
And one of those groups is the Forsaken, the other group is the Orcs. We've had enough of both. We need to focus. I'd like to see a little more Troll focus. Troll get a fair amount, but I'd like to see a little more. But I'd love to see lots more Tauren focus.
Tauren are one of the ones that have gotten almost nothing, really.
Yeah, like you pointed out, Maradon, and Maradon isn't even really about them.
No, it's
about the guys that used to hunt them.
Yep.
You know, it's not Tauren focused. We got the Tonka in Wrath, and that was nice, but it's a minor thing.
And, yeah,
we got the Yongle. We got the Yongle in Mists and a little bit more, but again, still not a major deal. It was the first time I think we've had a Tauren world boss. But other than that, oh, and by the way, I hate you, Ordos. Sorry. Had to get that out there. Might have popped otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Such a jerk. God, you're a dick, Ordos. Anyway, you don't get to join any coalitions. But yeah, I'd love to see more Tauren stuff. So I'd love to see, maybe explore that whole thing. Maybe it turns out, like, one of the things that was rumored was that the Tauren might all be descended from, in much the same way that there's various talk of, like, the Furbolg are descended from the Bear Ancients, like, created in his image to serve him or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
It might be that the Yongle are descended from Nizao, the big, you know, I want to say ox. I don't know what you'd call him, but the August Celestial, you know, of endurance and tenacity, they might all ultimately come from him, and that would be cool because we know that the Mogu were stealing the power of the August Celestials. We saw that in Throne of Thunder.
Mm-hmm.
They were stealing the power of all 4 of them. And it's interesting that the Sorok existed as a Mogu creation, and there's Yulong. So were the Sorok, created from dinosaurs, or were they possibly also related to, Yulon and her and so forth? There's a lot of cool things about it. I'd love to see more about that, about the Tauren in general.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think we have time to finish out the last one here.
Okay.
So this is from Gwynth. Hello, howdy watchers. I was doing new 9.1 questing and noticed something odd in some quest text. In the text for a caged bird, Danica says Keeper Odin must be warned of this foul betrayal. How could Danica's imprisonment and death of her fellow Valkyr be a betrayal? Does the deal over Odin's eye have more implications than we thought it may have? I think part of that is simply the fact that Helya is still around. Because when you go and tell Odin, straight up, he's kind of surprised. It's the whole, I thought she was dead, I thought we were done with this, but I guess not. And I think that's part of, the step one. Because, again, that whole thing with Helya, that whole mutually, trapped thing that was going on between the two of them, that's broken, and she was supposedly dead. She ain't dead anymore. And maybe that is some implications to do with the eye, because it does revolve around the Jailer's eye, or as we should call it, Odin's eye, which is using the Valkyr to sort of break down that power, because Odin seems to have no idea that it was being used and what it was being used for, which, again, not too terribly surprising. Odin's kind of laser focused on the wrong things, sort of his MO. So, but I don't know if it goes deeper than that. I don't know if there's extra implications behind it or if there's anything else. I think that's mainly it. I also think it's Odin kind of knew that other Valkyr were being made, but what we're experiencing with the Mawsworn, or the sort of their version of the tainted Kyrian, is not what I think what he expected or what he was told about. Don't forget that the Valkyr are sort of Odin's version of the Kyrian. So now Helya's got her version of the Kyrian, which is a complete perversion of whatever the natural cycle, or I shouldn't even say the natural cycle, I'll just call it the cycle was. So maybe it has something to do with that. I do think that Odin knows more than he's telling us, which is usually the case.
Yep, I would agree. Also, I think, though, that Odin doesn't know as much as he thinks he does.
Yeah.
And, you pointed out, it doesn't seem like he knew that his eye was being used the way it was. I don't know if he even knows what the Kyrian are. He was given the ability to make Valkyr. I don't know if he ever stopped to think about how he learned that, what it meant, where it came from. And it's really interesting to think about the fact that servants of the Jailer apparently knew how to make their own version of the Kyrian.
Mm-hmm.
Because they could give that information to Odin. What we're seeing in Shadowlands implies a lot about the Jailer's original role. It doesn't state it, it just implies it. So I think that, once I get to actually watch the cinematic and see if it makes me go, aha, or not, I definitely think it all connects back to the concept of the Arbiter and Oribos not being the original plan.
Looking at the Vault of Secrets, that pretty much gives you a good indicator of that too.
Yeah, the shattered nature of the Maw and the fact that it has pieces like Korthia floating out that can be brought back in. I definitely feel like we're going to find out that things used to be very different. And that this place, the Order as it currently exists, is built upon the original betrayal of Zoval. And his ultimate endgame is to try and set things back the way they were before he got caught. So we'll see what it is. We'll see what happens. But I definitely think Odin has been played here. I think that the betrayal is literally the fact that he's been lied to for literally thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
But everything Odin did, he did focused on what was going on in his realm, and never occurred to him that it was just part of a plan for somebody else. So.
Yeah, I think that pretty much answers it. What I would say, I don't know if there's much else to add.
If there is, we'll find out once we get done with the show and can go watch the cinematic.
Which is what we're going to probably do in about 2 minutes. So unless there's anything else you want to talk about, Matt?
Sure. You ever notice that cats have like really, really good like springing, but they're not necessarily as good at long distance running? Heat is, accepted.
It's true.
Anyway, that was just me being weird. Sure, like once you do that thing, you do.
I will. Blizzard Watch is made possible due to the generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to the podcast, better chance at having your question answered on our podcast or the queue, and an ads-free site experience.
Thank you very much, Joe. Again, guys, if you got questions for the show, and please have questions for the show. We love questions. You could ask some Diablo 4 questions, because I'm really wanting to talk about the most recent Diablo 4 thing. You can send them to podcast@blizzardwatch.com with the subject line podcast, Blizzard Watch, or hey, Matt, here's a Diablo question because I love you, and we'll know it's for this show. Or, you can ask Diablo questions on the other show. We'll take them there, too.
It's true, we will.
Or you can go to our Discord, our Patron Q and Podcast Questions channel, or our Q Questions channel, and you can ask questions there as well. Or I guess if you're telepathic, you can beam them directly into my head. But I got to warn you, there's some stuff in there I'm not too keen on sharing. I really don't want you guys to know about the robots. So be careful. Anyway, thanks you guys for being here. Thanks to Joe for being an amazing co-host as always.
No, thank you guys, and we'll see you, I guess, next week, yeah?
Yep. Thanks for being here with us. And we will be back next week, unless Sylvanas stops us.